He walked away from a 200K job, not because he had to, but he knew he was meant for more. Hi, everyone. I'm Raymond Lee, the host of Clocking Out. Today's guest is Bronson Hill. Bronson was on a career path most people dream of. 6 figures, medical sales, and stability. But somewhere along the way, he realized the truth. He was building wealth for someone else. That was his fire yourself moment, and he actually just did that. What I found fascinating is how Bronson reframes adversity. Whether it was getting cut from the basketball team, being fired from a church job, or getting rejected from his colleagues, Bronson never let setbacks become his identity. You're going to hear how Bronson's work sits at the intersection of ministry, mission, and money. He doesn't see business and faith as opposites. They're both vehicles for impact. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Bronson Hill and his clocking out journey. Bronson, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Hey, Raymond, happy to be here, man. It's like looking in a mirror here, seeing the bald head and it's I feel a brotherhood with people that have a shaved head, and it's fun. So.
Yeah, I love that. I started mine, I want to say 15 years ago. I was just around 35 when I decided I can't do this kind of patchy thing anymore. So yeah, I went all in.
Yeah, they say that men that have a shaved head are perceived by women to be more attractive and more intelligent. So it's kind of a little bit of a bold thing to do. But if you're a listener, you're losing your hair, just go for it. You'll never go back.
I love it. Well, it's so great to meet you. I know you and I connected several months ago. And the one thing that struck me, Bronson, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you have 2 things that really spoke to me. One is Design Your Freedom. And then the second is the book that you wrote, Fire Yourself. And the thing that is interesting about designing your freedom is I think everyone would like to design their freedom. And it feels like you've accomplished that in your work, but now you're teaching others how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm really passionate about just helping others to find a way out of the rat race. I was in a corporate job working full time, and it wasn't crazy hours, but I was making $200K a year, and it really becomes a golden handcuffs type experience where it's just too good to leave. My friends and family were like, "Oh, why would you ever leave your great job?" And I was like, "Well, because I want freedom. I want to have." It wasn't just financial freedom; it was time freedom, right? I was getting paid well, but what really kind of drove it home for me is I had a couple of physicians that I worked with that made literally millions of dollars a year, like multiple millions of dollars a year each. And they were working 60 to 80 hours a week every week, and they couldn't take a vacation. It was really hard to travel. They wouldn't get paid. I mean, they could travel, but it was not kind of what I looked at as freedom. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of time. And even in sales, like I was, I did, well in a quarter. I won some awards, and they say, "Okay, great job. Do it again next quarter." And it was just this grind. It was like you're really treated like. And so I kept saying, if I had the opportunity to do my own thing, if I had opportunity to leave, to create, as Warren Buffett would say, make money while you sleep, I would figure out how to do that. And so that's something I really delved deeply into, and I was able to pull it off, which is amazing.
Yeah, I love that. And the second thing that struck me was the title of your book, Fire Yourself. And I think about the podcast Clocking Out, and we provide stories to individuals and people about moments where you're in that rat race and you're in this grind and you're thinking to yourself, am I really truly fulfilled? And when is the moment that I do that? And your book title is so bold because it's a choice. It starts with firing yourself. And I'm eager to hear about how you came up with the title. But before we get to that, I really want to learn more about you. And so why don't you tell us, who's Bronson Hill? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little bit of Southern California, mostly in Seattle, and was, raised by single parent, just, very middle class. I did paper outs as a kid because my older brother did a paper out for a couple of years and was able to buy his own car. And so I was like, oh, that's awesome. I should do that. I played a little bit of sports, did a little bit of drama stuff, was involved in my church, did different things, kind of had a bunch of interests. And, but I think what happened to me as a kid was, we didn't have a lot. We weren't poor, but we didn't have a lot. So, but I realized if I wanted something, I had to find a way to get it. So the paper route was great because it was like, if I go do this for an hour a day, I can make a couple $100s a month or a few $100s a month. And it was that way I actually could have some cash. And so I kind of kept looking at, okay, work is a way to generate income. It's a way I could actually grow my wealth over time. And so, so I think that was very informative for me. I actually had some time where I really, had a profound spiritual experience and really wanted to be a youth pastor and a pastor. So I did that for a number of years. And people say, oh, what you're doing now is so different than that. And I was like, well, it's kind of similar. I mean, you're helping people. It's just a different way of helping people. And so I looked at it. For me, it was really a critical time in high school where I found God, or I found this faith and purpose for my life. And I just think that at the end of the day, that's really the most important thing, is finding why you're here. What's your why for doing what you do? So that's a little bit of my story.
That's great. I appreciate that. So I want to go back to when, like, you were talking about this paper route, and I've never done a paper route before. And I feel like it seems like you and your brother learn at an early age entrepreneurship. And I wonder, were there other things that you dreamt to be as a kid?
Yeah, I actually had a lot of things I wanted to be as a kid. I wanted to be a shoe designer for Nike. I was kind of a creative side as well, so I wanted to do that. Of course, I wanted to be a basketball player, but I didn't end up getting the height that I wanted for that. But I think a lot of us have dreams when we're kids to do all kinds of different things. And I didn't really know. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to school. I think when I started college, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to major in. I was like, I kind of had a desire to do business related things. I also had a desire to do ministry, and so I kind of did some of both. But I think, our what we do as a kid really shapes us. And so I think that having those experiences were really valuable to say, hey, if I want to create something in my life, one of my big goals now is I want to create a lot of wealth so I can give to causes I believe in. One of the causes is to end modern day human slavery in the world. A lot of people don't realize that there's 20 to 40 million human slaves today in 2025. It's more than there's ever been. And so, there's just a lot of people that get in this and they never get out of it, right? So how do we people that are in that situation? And so, so there's things like that. I try to look at my life and say, I want to be a great dad to my daughter. I want to be present for my family and my friends, and I want to really make a difference in the world. And I think that at the end of life, life goes very quickly. I mean, there's this phenomenon. I'm 45 now. As you get older, every year is this thing where it just feels like it goes faster and faster. And my dad, who's 74, he says the same thing. He's like, oh, I just feel like I'm just out of college. And it's like, well, Dad, you're 74. But that's kind of how it feels, right? You can't go back. But all we really have is today. So if I want to make a difference, I've got to be very clear on what I want. I've got to be continually also evaluating, am I getting the results out of my life that I want? If I'm not getting the results I want out of my life right now, then I need to go back and say, what needs to change so that I can start getting different results out of the things that I'm actually trying to do right now in my life.
So you mentioned that you had this desire to be a professional basketball player, an athlete, and it seems like at an early age, you had this dream big sort of mentality and this desire to want to just dream big and be big. And I guess at some age you realize maybe it was height that wasn't going to get you on the NBA. But where do you think that came from? Is it your parents that you got this sort of, just this real big sort of dreamy kind of desire? Like, where do you think that came from?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I'm not exactly sure. My dad one time, I remember he said very vividly, he said, limits in life are made to be broken. Like, there are limits that are out there, they're made to be broken. And it wasn't saying like break the rules, but he was saying like there's certain things that have natural limitations or things that it just seems impossible. And it's like, it's important to go for your dreams. It's important to go for things that matter. And my dad was a college basketball player at a smaller school, but he played in college. So I kind of thought, this is possible if I work hard. And it wasn't, again, I think, as a sophomore in high school, I got cut from the team, 5'7", 130 pounds. I was a little bit smaller. I didn't have quite the ball skills, but, I found, I think I was very opportunistic, and I think I still am, is if something's not working, keep recreating and keep trying something new. And I think that the problem with a lot of us is that we look at failure and we take it really hard. We take it personal, right? If something fails, I'm a failure, or I'm not good at whatever the thing is. But failure is only information. Like, I tried this thing and this thing did not work. So if the thing didn't work, I can simply just try something else that will work. And as an entrepreneur or as a real estate investor, you've got to try lots of different things. I tried, A didn't work and B didn't work and C was okay, but it could be a little better than D. But version E was like, that was awesome. So you double down on version E. You still have the same goal, but you're willing to keep trying different things. And so there's a lot of things in life that I call them low risk experiments. Like, if you try something and it doesn't work, you don't die or lose all your money, right? Those are like pretty just bad scenarios. But if it's like, okay, I try this thing, I spent a little bit of money on it, it took a little bit of my time, but if it works, it could be a 10x or 100x kind of thing. Well, that's worth doing. I'll do that all day long. And most things in life are kind of like that, where it's like, I can kind of get into something, I can learn about it, I can try it. And if it doesn't work, I can move on to something else.
Yeah, I love that. As you were just talking, I was thinking about all the things that you did as a kid that led to where you are today. And I can only imagine that there were mistakes along the way, and you sort of have this learning growth mindset where you're not afraid to take risks and put yourself out there. And you realize, if I take these low risks and there's a failure, there's going to be a learning and growth that comes from that. And so I feel like, that's a really good kind of life lesson.
Yeah. I think you really have to get good. You've got to get good at reframing failure, because you look at Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he failed like in 5 or 6 different elections. One of his sons died. His mother died. All this stuff happened in a very, very, very difficult things. And then what happened later in his life is, obviously, he was one of the most influential presidents, went through a very difficult situation. But the stuff in our life, again, I'm a big personal development guy. Tony Robbins will say, life is, success in life is about 80% psychology. It's getting the right attitude towards something. It's about 20% mechanics. So if that's true, I've got to spend a lot of time making sure I'm in the right presence. I think when you start your day with a morning routine, maybe you visualize yourself as who you want to be, you do some gratitudes, you do these things that create this kind of almost like a win in the morning. You get excited about your life, about your day, about the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm alive, I'm breathing today, I can walk, I have a job, or I have a career, I have people that love me. Oh my gosh, this is amazing if you really think about it. But our mind is so negative. We're like 85% negative, right? It's a survival technique or a survival thing. But the more we can just really put ourselves in a situation where we see that brighter future, we're creating for ourselves something that's wonderful. It really allows us to live in and to be somebody who creates new possibilities that really didn't exist before.
Yeah, that is so relatable. When you said the Tony Robbins and the 80%, I have cut out in the morning watching the news.
Yeah.
I do CrossFit in the morning at 6:15, and I used to get up and I'd turn the news on and I'd watch that really quick and then run to the gym. And now I've found myself conducting 15 minutes of just breath work in a quiet room. I do grab a cup of coffee and I'm sitting there and I'm just concentrating on my breath. And that moment in the morning creates so much clarity for me. And then it allows me to open up to be grateful for the things that, I sometimes could take for granted. And so I completely relate to this idea of how this negative stimulus can take you down a path that, takes you away from being grateful and all the things that you just described.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's easy to, there's so many negative things in the world and negative people. Honestly, some people just kind of get stuck there and they don't want to get out of that. And so there's a saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if I want to change my life, I've got to get around different people. I've got to be selective. I've got to say, well, who is, who's 10 times, 10x where I'm at with wealth, right? Who's 10x the net worth? How can I get in a room with someone like that? How can I get in a relationship and learn from them? And how can I get around people that are health-wise? I'm a fitness guy as well. So how can I get at the next level? What are the things that are going to help me get there? When it comes to other, the different things, breath work, gratitudes, some of the personal workshops, things like that, journaling, these things that are great. We got to start really surrounding ourselves with these things. And if something's not working, I'm really big at taking some time away. And like every quarter I go away for 2 nights and I'll just literally reflect on, the primary question is, what are the results I'm getting out of my life right now? And is it consistent with what I want? And if it's not, what needs to change so that I can create something different. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's just an input and output. I could fast forward the next 10 years and say, I pretty much can tell what's going to happen. Right. I can say, oh, I'm probably gonna be doing this. Here's the people in my life, whatever. So unless you make a drastic change, a radical change, you can predict what's going to happen. And so that's how people make these shifts. That's how I raised $50 million. That's how I left my corporate jobs. I had to continually really go to, okay, this is the person I'm becoming. Well, if I'm this person, what needs to change in my life so that I'm not just doing the same things I've always done?
Yeah. That makes so much sense. So tell me, how did you pick your college degree and where you were going to go to school?
Yeah, so initially I went to a number of colleges. When I was in high school, they had this program where you could do something called Running Start, and this is the state of Washington. You could do your first 2 years of college while you're going to high school. And so my junior and senior year, I just would go to the college and they would pay for my classes and I would go. And so I ended up graduating with my 2-year degree. I had my 2-year college degree when I graduated high school. And then I had a plan to go golf. I was a golfer, so I golfed a bit in high school and I was going to go to this small school and I wasn't good enough, but I was like, I'm going to go walk on. I'll try to get there. And it was like a 3rd-tier school. It was not even like, it was like Western Washington University, right? So no offense, but it's not like the top. It's not like USC or something. It was like so I applied. And I got this response that was like, yeah, sorry, better luck elsewhere. It wasn't like a wait list. It wasn't a whatever. And I had okay. I was decent grades and stuff. But it's kind of ironic because later on I got into University of Washington Business School, which was a top 10 business school, at the time. And so I actually ended up graduating from Washington State because I had moved to California where I live and I did some distance learning. This was years ago. And so I did that. But that, I really chose business because, as I mentioned, I did some ministry stuff. But I was really interested in business as well. And how do we really, make a difference in the community? How do we help, meet felt needs? And so, I see it's very similar to a lot of the ministry stuff. Is just how do we serve people? How do we help people? How do we help them get what they want?
I love that. So how did you come across ministry work and how does that intersect with business?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I grew up in a Christian home. We went to church on Sunday. To me, God was way up there. I'm down here. I had this experience when I was 16 where I was at this little church. I just felt like God was calling out to me. It was like became this very personal relationship. Like I feel like, at that point I was like, wow, like actually he's right here. He's not just up there, he's right here. And so I just was so impacted by that experience that I really wanted all my friends to know about. I wanted my, people around me to know about faith, and it just gave me such a purpose. I'd kind of gone down a party route and just, was kind of starting to go down the way of a lot of teenage guys would go and teenagers in general. And so I just felt it was so powerful. So I just realized this is something I want to give my life to. And so I started, shortly out of high school, I became a youth pastor, started helping other students. And it just was very meaningful to me. I really would love to see people find that. Even now, I love seeing people find their purpose and their meaning and why they're here. And I think a relationship with God is a big part of that. And so I kind of thought at the time, Raymond, that it had to be either, I work at a church or do ministry or I'm a missionary, or I do business, right? That they couldn't be both. And so I realized that maybe it can be both. Maybe I can be someone who has a mindset to really love and serve and spread God's love with people and be in the business world. So that's something I've been able to do now. It's just, and I've worked at churches. I lived overseas in Africa in college. I've done different things like in the past, but I just feel like, if you are someone who's a believer and you love God, then we're all called to ministry, right? We're all called to serve and love and help other people. It doesn't matter if you work at a church or not, or you do something that's considered spiritual. We're all called, everywhere we go, we're called to be the light. And so I think there's a lot of darkness in the world. And so if we can be positive, we can be encouraging, we can help others, we can serve others, it really speaks very widely to a lot of people.
Wow. I love that. It feels so balanced, and I could share on a personal level. In my 20s, I was sort of down that same kind of spiral path. I had a lot of, personal things that happened to me early in my childhood that, got me into stuff that I, probably not proud of, but I ended up becoming a youth minister as well.
Okay.
I didn't get a college degree and didn't go study for it, but I decided in my 20s I was going to go back to church and got involved with the youth. And the thing that I learned, Bronson, is not only did the kids grow from my example, but I grew from them, and seeing how, their minds opened up to God and the Spirit. And it is certainly life-changing. I could say that, and has led to who I am today in terms of the foundation that I needed to really lean in on my identity. And so what you're sharing is very relatable. So tell me about your first job. You graduated, you have your college degrees. What was your first job? What did that look like?
So my first job out of college, what did I do? I did an internship and I lived overseas for a little bit doing some missions work. So I came to, I came back to Southern California. I got my master's, and then my first real job, I worked part-time as the kind of youth missions coordinator for our denomination to help send people out for mission trips. And then I kept saying I just didn't like some of the politics in the office, but like just there were some real strong personalities. It was a little hard to relate and kind of feel like I belonged. So I kept saying I want to get back to the local church. So I took a job in Montana, of all places, at a mega church out there. So I was a youth pastor, had a couple full-time staff, and it was a great experience. Learned a lot, loved the people out there, and got a great chance to speak every week to a couple hundred high school students, and just really develop some of my skills of leadership and just kind of being, in a place that was new. And so that was really my first real job.
So what was it about that job that you liked or didn't like?
What I like about the job, I loved working with young people. I really liked the ability to present and communicate weekly, to be able to preach. In a way, I really enjoyed just how it all worked. One thing that was challenging, because the group was so big, it didn't feel like doing ministry in the same way because it was so big. And for people that have done, worked at a church or done, small groups things, it's when you have a larger group or even a larger organization, it's just harder to relate with everyone. It's hard to know everybody who's there. It's hard to know who made it or didn't make it. And so it was a lot more administrative and a lot more leadership focused. But like now, I lead a small men's group for the last 7 or 8 years at my house, and it's guys in their 20s and 30s. And I just love doing that. I get so much value out of doing that personally. But so there's a lot of great things about it. It has some great coaching, some great mentorship. And I did that for about 1.5 years. And then I've never been fired from a job, Raymond, but they came to me on, you're laughing because like at churches, this stuff can happen, but I think you might have a story there too. Right. But they came to me after Christmas, and I'm divorced now, unfortunately, but I just got married 6 months earlier, and they said, we just don't think it's a good fit. And your last day is Tuesday. And I was like, what? And here, like I bought a house out here, I've gotten married, all this stuff. And so, there's definitely some, kind of dark night of the soul moments there, but in their hand, it's like everything happens for a reason. Doesn't happen, to us, happens for us, but definitely challenging times, at least after that. But it definitely also led me to where I'm at now.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. It's interesting. You think, working in the church, you're fireproof. You shouldn't ever lose your job. It's like a job for life, right?
Right.
That's interesting. So what was the next sort of thing in terms of your career? And after that, did you make a switch, or did you kind of stay the course?
Yeah, so I did. I made a switch. After I got fired from my job as a youth pastor, I really had a dark night of the soul moment where I was like, what am I here to do? What's my purpose? What's the next thing? So I did some personality assessments. I realized that you basically like somebody in sales. If you were in sales, you do really well. And I was thinking like, man, can you make any money doing that? I didn't even know. I was like, and then I learned obviously you can do very well in sales. But through a series of events, I got into medical device sales. It was kind of a God thing where somebody, said, you should work in medical device sales. And like a week later, guy's like, I work in medical device sales. And so like, I was like, oh my gosh. And so he like, oh, give me an interview. It's just like totally an awesome God thing. But so I think that was powerful to get in. And I've had this feeling of when I got in, I was like, okay, these guys are giving me a shot. I've got to prove myself. So the first couple of years, I was just really working very hard. And I did very well. I was able to do very well and kind of move up and end up going to surgical sales and then cardiology sales and, make a good income. It's pretty competitive there, but I really like the competition. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I can only go back to your dreams when you were a kid. Like you had these huge dreams of being a professional athlete, and it's sort of like you had these aspirations where you knew the harder I work, it's going to allow me to create bigger opportunities. And sales felt like that's the right entry point for you to build out your career to where you have this ability to influence people, present, pitch, sell yourself. These are all things that I think are foundational, in terms of you and sort of your growth. So I think you landed in the perfect job, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I love what I do now. I get to help people really on their path. I get to have conversations around things that are really meaningful. A lot of times people start talking and they start talking about their kids and the legacy they want to leave there or the difference they want to make in the world. And I've noticed when a lot of people become financially free, so they have more than enough money, they get to, usually a million, couple million or more, they kind of say, well, what can I do to get back? Or what's really the point? What can I do now? What's the next 10 years look like or the next 20 years look like? And that's where I think it gets exciting, because then people start to say, well, I want to create this. I want to create this with my kids. And one thing I love creating memories with my daughter. My daughter's turning 13 next month, and we went to Alaska this summer. We did a tent camping trip in the peninsula of Washington State. So in the Seattle area is really lovely. And so we started doing those kind of annual trips. And so I just know as she gets older, those are things we're going to look back on and say, wasn't that great? We got to do this. And but at the end of the day, most people get to the end of their life and they don't say, hey, I wish I had worked more, or I wish I had, I wish I had achieved more. There are some people that will say, hey, I wish I had tried. I wish I had tried the thing that was in my heart. Some people will have those regrets. But a lot of times it's, I wish I had spent more time with my family. I wish I had really, prioritized them over work, right? And a lot of times I catch myself where I'm just so busy, we get home, I got to, get some dinner and get my daughter to bed, and I want to get to bed. And I don't always just sit there and say, hey, let's just play a card game, or let's just sit and talk. Tell me how this is going. And so I think presence is more important than the presence of physical gifts that we give to people, right? Just showing up and being fully present. And it's hard to do, but I think it's something that we're called to.
I love that. It's so relatable, but it also is very, it's inspiring. I mean, to think about being able to create a life for yourself where you can spend more time with your family, go on trips whenever you wanted to go on trips, and just really, experience that, because life's short and you're not going to have that opportunity with them. So how did you get to this point of designing your freedom? When was that moment where you said to yourself, was it, I'm not going to work as a salesperson in medical device? When did you get to that point where it's I'm ready to fire myself?
Yeah, so it happened after a quarter that I had done very well in sales, and my manager said, hey, great job, slap on the back, you did really well at sales. And then there was kind of a short pause, and it was okay, well, let's see. I mean, maybe there was more time than that, but it felt like there was a short pause. And then it was kind of a, hey, let's see if we can do better next quarter. Let's see if we can do more. And I just thought, this is really the treadmill that most of us are on, right? That we simply are told to do more and do better. And I think especially with some of the advances in AI and some of these other things, it's there's so much pressure on performing at a job. And I'm totally fine working 110%, working super hard, but I didn't want to have to hustle and grind for someone else. And I realized I was making, I was making millions of dollars over the years for other people. And I just thought, man, if I could just simply be in a place where I could work hard and benefit from that, and also have a potential to grow assets, right? To be a part of the upside. And that's where a lot of employees, we trade the upside to have a little more security, even though I don't think there's a lot of security in any job these days, right? I think even government work, as we've seen with the shutdown, things are not always as secure as what they seem like. Versus if you have passive income, if you have net worth, and you know how to grow wealth, it does give you more financial security to have more options. I think that's the thing. If people have wealth, it gives them more options as they get older. But so I just think for me, it was really those moments of, I don't want to be doing this grind just for someone else for years and years to come.
Yeah, I'm going to ask for your advice in a little while on how to make that transition. So when you talk about, though, you were making all this money in sales for the company, and you were building wealth for the company that you were working for. We know how that feels. It's sort of like, I'm working 80 hours a week to make shareholders rich, essentially. So when do you start creating this freedom or designing this freedom? Is it while you're working, or is it you cut the cord and I'm going to now fire myself? Because it feels like firing yourself is like something that happens and then you go building something. And I just wonder, was there a overlap period where you started creating this new thing before actually firing yourself?
Yeah. So how do you actually fire yourself? Some people will take out debt and join a real estate course and just be like, I'm doing it. I fired myself. They'll just kind of go for it and like sink or swim. Other people will be like a month or two from retirement and be like, all right, I fired myself. I left early. So it's kind of everywhere in between, right?
I love that.
Yeah, but there's extremes here, right? So I think what the first step is to figure out not just necessarily how much you make in income, but what is your rat race number? Meaning, for me, I was making $200K a year. I only needed about $6,000 a month to actually live okay, right? I could pay for my housing, I could pay for my insurance, I could pay for food and some travel. That was enough for me at the time. Now that would be higher now because of inflation, but it was enough at the time to be able to say that's enough to live. And then from there, I could say, okay, I have that money coming in. Now, how does that money come in? It comes from investing in one deal that provides some cash flow. It comes from investing in deals that kind of develop over the long term. So it might take 3 to 5 years to start developing that to get to where, okay, I can replace my working income with passive income. My book says you can do it in 3 years, which I was able to do in 3 years, but then there are people that do. But you start that process to be able to learn and grow. And then what happens over time is you scale it up. And then once you get to the place where you've covered your rat race number, then you are in a different place. Like if you have an employer, you can go to work with a little bit different, swagger, right? Like, hey, even if this doesn't work out, I've got enough coming in. I don't need this job. Most of us, over 50% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. It's a steady show. They over a $400 expense. They'd have serious trouble figuring out how to pay. And so, it's challenging. So how do you actually do this? You have to start developing the passive income. Once it exceeds your work income, then you can start saying, okay, what do I want to create here? And maybe, if you had all your expenses covered, what would you do for them? Would you write music? Would you travel? Would you write books? Just visualizing what that is. And they say that we don't change unless the pain of staying how we are is greater than the pain of what, going, like some sort of change that happens, right? So, we got to create that bright future. We got to create what we want and make it urgent and make it feel like it's got to happen now, because otherwise our years just go by and nothing changes.
Mm-hmm. So I like this approach. It's starting to sort of come together for me, and I love the 3-year goal. Like to fire yourself, you get to a sustainable income, passive income within 3 years. And what's making sense is that if let's just say the passive income isn't necessarily the thing that you want to do long term, like in terms of you have this passion of something that you want to do, where it could be volunteering or coaching or, starting a company or something that you're looking to, sort of take a risk to build something new that really excites you. Your fire yourself within 3 years creates a vehicle for you to be able to do those things without feeling like you have to earn an income 40 hours a week before you can do that thing. So it's sort of like the two could complement each other.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't have to be, I've got to leave my job tomorrow. But, for a lot of us, Warren Buffett, his quote, unless you learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. Now, ironically, Warren Buffett is 95, I think, and I think he's just now retiring. But he talked about tap dancing to work. He's doing what he wants to do. Most of us are unfulfilled. I know you work in the career industry as well. And like most people, over 70% of people around that amount are saying they're not fulfilled at work. They're not engaged at work. And I think it's a tragedy. I think if we were doing things that we felt, like we had enough coming in, we could do whatever we wanted to do and really develop passion and really go after it. And the problem is a lot of us, we have expenses, we've got a big house, we've got kids, we've got whatever. And so it's not always doable right now. But what we can do is take small steps toward what we want, right? So maybe I can't become financially free this month, but if I start putting money in, can I develop in the next 6 months? Can I find an investment that'll bring you back $1,000 a month consistently, right? Well, that's a good goal. What about from there? If I do that, can I start doing other investments that are similar of different types of assets so that I'm not all in one specific asset, but there's some diversity. And over time, I start seeing more cash flow coming in. I think that's super powerful. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of cash flow, because it allows people to become more free. I think those are a few things that really help people to fire themselves. And in the book, I get into very specific opportunities on how to, step 1, 2, 3, evaluate deals that make sense, and ones that are, not just owning a rental house or not running an online business, but actually are passive. Somebody else does the work.
So can we lean into that a little bit? I'd like to understand. So you are earning this $200K a year. You're successful sales, but you had this desire to want to be on your own and do this for yourself. And so the idea of firing yourself was not necessarily a reality in terms of the book, but you went through this journey where you got to a place where you were on the other side. And I wonder if you could share one or two examples of things that you did, some of the small wins that you had when you were transitioning out of the corporate job that could be relatable to someone who is thinking about doing something similar.
Yeah. So the first thing I did, there's kind of two things that really help people to get to the next level. It kind of works in every area of life, but it especially works when it comes to wealth building. The first one is networking, and not in the sense of like handing out business cards and shaking hands. Like that's not good networking, but good networking is getting in the room with people that are amazing people and finding a way to serve and help them. And so I would go to real estate meetups. I actually went to an expensive investor cruise. The guy who wrote the best-selling investment book of all time, Robert Kiyosaki, was there. He wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so when I was at this event specifically, and this didn't happen right away, but over time, I mean, it was expensive. I think it was over $6,000 or $7,000 to go. But I basically said, I found a guy who I really valued in the industry. And I just said, hey, what can I do to help, in this specific area of your business? Can I help you raise money? He was helping other people raise money, but he was having trouble raising money himself. I didn't know that, but I said, hey, can I help in this area? Here's how it would look. Here's what we could do. And I wasn't necessarily thinking like, I'm going to leave kind of my own thing I had been starting on the side to go help him. But it actually worked out, and he opened up something and said, hey, let's do this, and here's how it would work. And I looked at it, and I was like, well, this sounds like a great opportunity to learn, and it looks like a great opportunity to earn by doing it that way as well. So to earn and to learn. So networking is huge, but again, it has to be this give first approach where I'm trying to say, hey, how do I serve someone else? And it doesn't have to be, for me, I was more on the active side where I was like, well, I don't have a lot of money to invest, which a lot of people are discouraged because they don't have money to invest. But you can basically use other people's money, right? And that's what I've done is I've helped other people with a money problem where they have money, they don't know where to put it, and I help them educate them to get them into deals. For people that have money, they can say, well, I can just passively invest, but still being around in rooms of people that are successful, that are doing great things, that can be really valuable. And then the second thing beyond networking or kind of bringing value to other people really is the educational piece, right? Just learning, like the great shows like yours, podcasts. I'm a big book reader. This year, my goal is to read 100 books. I think I'm at 90 or 91 so far. So like just really trying to learn as much as I can about a lot of different topics. And what that does is that just opens your eyes to what's possible. And if I love reading biographies, historical books, how-to books, personal growth, mindset. So all that stuff is just so valuable because it helps you, again, look at your life differently. And some of the best, most successful people in the world, we mentioned Warren Buffett, we talk about Mark Cuban, Oprah Winfrey. These people read often hours a day, right? So if the wealthiest people and the busiest people in the world find a way to read hours a day, maybe we should look into that as well.
Well, so you said two things there, networking and learning. And I feel like people who are on that hamster wheel and are in this rat race, they don't provide the capacity to learn and network. And you mentioned Tony Robbins earlier. He talked about this 80-20 sort of rule where if you can carve out your corporate job where you're doing, especially now virtual, if you can do that in 80% of your time and you can create 20% capacity to network and learn, that is going to provide you with so many ideas of things that you can do to move yourself forward. And so I just love that advice. And I feel like people who are in this situation where they want this freedom, they have to be willing and able to invest in creating relationships and creating community outside of corporate, as well as invest in themselves. And I think I'm personally not a reader, but I am obsessed with Audible and podcasts. Yeah. And so when I'm on the road or I'm traveling or even working out, I'm consuming content. And so I think however you consume that learning and that content that works for you, it's so critical.
And I think reading works. I mean, listening to books counts. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're listening to a book. That doesn't really count." I was like, I listen to most of my stuff. I don't read it physically as a book, but I actually retain pretty well. And so I think it's however you get it. Like you said, it's just that you're somebody who's a learner. Like if you continue to learn and get better, And most people don't. Most people get to be 30s, 40s. They stop reading, they stop learning, they stop listening to things that can help them. But this is how we grow, right? We get around people, we learn things, and that's how people get to the next level.
Mm. So let's talk about the work that you're doing today with, and I'd like you to comment on the Mailbox Money show. I think that's so interesting, and it aligns with the idea of passive income because, money is just showing up in your mailbox, and you're educating people who are spending time and want to learn about passive income. But you've done over 225 shows, so kudos to you for that. But yeah, tell me about your podcast and how you came up with the name.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The Mailbox Money show is money that shows up in your mailbox. You're not just having to grind for it. It's like owning real estate, right? It's just somebody pays the rent, it shows up. And so we should call it the direct deposit show because most money shows up now as like an ACH or direct deposit. But it's a great feeling, right? When your passive income comes in and you see these funds coming in, it's like, oh, that's really nice to see that. So I think that for most people, they want to start developing passive income, but they don't know how. And honestly, there's a lot of things that kind of mislead people, like, oh, if I own a rental house or two, or if I have an online business, or if I do a stock trading strategy, but none of these things are actually passive, right? There are things that if you were, and really the test, I have this thing called the passive investing test is it actually a passive investment? Well, if you can't 10x what you are currently doing. So if you have 3 rental houses, and you're self-managing, you couldn't quickly go to 30 houses, right? And this involves a lot. You got to find the homes, you got to acquire them, you got to find the finance, you got to pay, you got to do this stuff. And you actually have to manage these 30 homes. That basically can become another job for you. So that's not ideal, right? You want to have something that you actually can scale. And so there's this saying, there are no such thing as passive investments. And in a way, I really agree with that. But I think there are things that are more passive. The reason nothing is fully passive is because no one cares about your money the way you do, right? So you got to be involved at some level. But there's a way of vetting a deal, getting a relationship with someone, a group like ours or other groups that basically do different types of projects and saying, I'm going to have them do the work, right? So our investors, they don't manage the properties themselves. They don't get the calls from the property manager. They don't, they'll read the financial reports, but they're not in the driver's seat on that, right? We're in the driver's seat and our partners in the driver's seat to help kind of make sure those things happen. So that's where I find with passive investing, it's just learning how to actually develop the mailbox money comes from just the skills of having calls and learning who's a good operator. And I talk about it quite a bit in the book, Fire Yourself, on how to do that.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I listened to a couple of shows. I even went back to your first show with Tim Hubbard, Achieving Financial Freedom. I always like to go back to the genesis of where it started. And the cool thing about your podcast, Bronson, is that you stay true to the topic. I hadn't listened to all 225, but I listened to the most recent and the first one, and there was a lot of nuggets there that I learned, and I see just the common thread. So really, really appreciate that. So I wanted to come back to this advice. You talked about, you had this income and you were earning this, steady income. And for people who are in a place where maybe money isn't necessarily the biggest driver, but it's just like, I'm just not happy. And they could be making, 60 grand a year or whatever. Like they're not making, 6 figures or even higher. But they know they're not happy and they want to do something different and they're just stuck. Like how do they start? Like where do you begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for most people, we kind of, sometimes we know what we need to do. I think, I remember a time I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now. And it was like, I knew, okay, what I need to do, I need to work out more and eat less, right? That's kind of what I know I need to do, but I'm just not doing it. And so sometimes there's reasons why we don't do the things we want to do. But I think at the end of the day, each of us has to come to our own idea that we make a decision, right? Like, okay, for me, what I did is I said, okay, in 3 years, I want to be out of my job. I don't want to be doing this anymore. I want to have something else created. It was almost 3 years to the month that less than 3 years, but I was able to leave and be able to do my own thing, which is great. Like I was able to do that. But again, when you set a goal for yourself, you start to create that brighter future. And then everything else, you just see yourself as, okay, well, if I'm this person that's doing this, if I'm the person that I can take a Tuesday off, or I can go on a trip. I traveled 6 times international last year, including base camp of Mount Everest and Portugal, right, in India. So like, those are things that I've loved that I've been able to create, but it's all possible. We just got to continue to create that for ourselves. But I think the first step is really making a decision. Like, hey, this is what I want. I want to have passive income in. I want, and how much exactly, and when is that going to happen by? And what happens is when you make the decision, your subconscious starts to go to work, and you begin to see, it's called the reticular activating system. It's like when you buy a car and you are excited about it, and it's a red, I don't know, sports car or something. You start seeing that car everywhere, right? Because those cars were always there, but you just didn't notice them because you weren't focused on it, right? So wherever we're focused on, that's what we start to bring towards ourselves. And so the first thing is when we make that decision of what we actually want. And so it's important to journal and to get clear on this is, I don't want to be doing this job, or I want to be in this type of situation. I want to create these experiences for my family. I want to write the book. I want to do the whatever, start the business, whatever that thing is. And well, what do I need to get there? And then just as you put yourself in the mode of this is going to happen, your mind will fill in ways to do it. And just being willing to go new places, to meet new people, and to be open to new opportunities. People have obviously done this, right? This is how Elon Musk and some of these people are so effective and wealthy, is that they thought differently. They continue to recreate and say, well, let's go to Mars, let's do reusable rockets, let's do whatever. Well, nobody thought that stuff was possible until somebody said, well, I think it's possible, let's do it, right? So it's making that decision of what you actually want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said so many things there, and I love how you incorporated the personal, with the weight loss, and it is a decision. And I think related to the weight loss, it's all about habits. And what came to mind is James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which I'm sure you've read in one of your books. And it's really all about changing the habits. And that subconscious is real, and it's going to shape the habits that you form and lead you to that 3-year mark, which I think is a great goal. Bronson, this has been great. I really appreciate this time here and sort of giving us this full story about you as a young lad delivering papers to the great work that you've done in the church and all of the things that you've done throughout your career. I really appreciate the time that you spent here today.
Thanks, man. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you having the chat, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, fantastic. And we're going to share all your information about your book, your podcast, and our show notes. So for those who are interested in connecting with Bronson, thanks again.
Yeah, I've got a free gift for your audience if you like. I wrote this free guide called How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage. And so if basically some creative strategies using real estate, debt, even precious metals, and it's stuff that we really haven't heard how to get on the other side of the equation. So it's about 20 pages. Love to share with your audience. If you text the word inflation to the number 33777, so you just take the word inflation, text it to 33777, we'll share that with you for free, and you hear about kind of what we're working on too.
That's great. We'll certainly provide that as well. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment to say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you'd like to hear more on Clocking Out, we'd love for you to take a second and click follow of your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. You can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Just search Clocking Out with Raymond Lee and hit subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to check out our episode polls or just drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you or someone you know has a story to share about navigating change, taking a risk, or rethinking your career, we want to hear from you. Head to the link in our show notes and fill out the form to be considered for a future episode. Until next time, remember, if you're just sitting there thinking that you're stuck or you're unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.